Call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Here.
Mr. Lunder,
Here.
Mrs. Thompson. Here. Mrs. Moore. Here. Mr. Shaboo.
Here.
Mr. Morris.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here. First on the agenda is the public hearing for resolution number 2022-R-13, approving budget. So I will call to order the public hearing on resolution 2022-R-13. You can please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-13, a resolution approving the 2023 budget.
Will the administrative director please provide a brief explanation of this resolution?
The resolution is mandatory that we pass every year. These are the approved tax millage that we have on file with Lake County collective property.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience on the resolution? Hearing none. We will now hear from persons who wish to speak in favor of the resolution. Please step to the lectern and state your name and give your name and address for the record. If you'd like to speak in favor. Okay. We will now hear from persons who wish to speak against the resolution. Again, please step to the lectern and state your name and address for the record. Hearing none. Do members of council wish to comment on the resolution? Okay, it's pretty typical for these, so. Public hearing is closed at 7:02 p.m. We'll now move on to the rest of the agenda. Approval of minutes, regular meeting of council for June 14th, 2022. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So made.
Made by Mr. Moore, seconded by Mr. Shaboo. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Correspondence, clerk, is there any correspondence tonight?
I have no correspondence to know.
Okay, I have correspondence. I will start with that and then I'll call the rest of you. This is, subject is Committee of the Whole performance. To all on council, it's my understanding from a previous explanation that the Committee of the Whole meetings are working meetings where an agenda is set and the committee chair decides who gets to speak because we need to have dialogue once in a while. And with that in mind, while Ms. Crane spoke for nearly an hour, I noticed that not much legislating was taking place. And certainly members of council had little time with which to discuss the pressing issues as listed on the agenda. I agree that it's important for everyone to have the opportunity to speak. And the 10-minute segments the public is allowed when deemed appropriate by the council is something that should be applied uniformly to members of the public. What we all experienced that evening was in essence a monologue from a property owner, and a performance of that nature would be considered unacceptable behavior, as was once explained to us in a previous meeting. It's interesting that the show was encouraged to go on and on. The issue isn't why the decision was made to allow such a breach of established protocol. It is why it was allowed to continue in lieu of advancing the important legislation that is currently underway. Whether you agree with me in part or entirely, the health, safety, and welfare of the residents of Mentor-on-the-Lake stands to be impacted by the decisions that are in front of the council, and it would be to everyone's benefit if the focus stays on those issues and does not get sidetracked by emotional orations and adversarial dialogue. Regards, Tess Turi. I responded to Ms. Turi. Ms. Turi, first of all, yes, committee of the whole meetings are working meetings, and it is within my right as chair to allow individuals to speak to council or the public as I wish. Council may object to my decision and overrule the decision of the chair if they so choose. Since the topic of the PUD was first on the agenda and Judge Crane wished to speak, and none of us had heard from her previously, I felt it appropriate to allow her to speak and provide her view on the PUD, the proposed development, and answer any questions anyone had. I am sorry that you felt that, since you clearly wasn't in agreement with your own views, that it was inappropriate. I will point out that Judge Crane only spoke for approximately 10 minutes before I allowed the audience to ask questions. And time limits are at my discretion for committee of the whole meetings. It was the audience that prolonged the engagement in the meeting. I made a decision to allow questions from the public for Judge Crane. So if you would like to complain about the length of time Judge Crane was allowed to speak, please register that complaint with your cohorts. They could have asked no questions and ended her time there. I simply allowed your group to ask any questions they wished since she was available. And frankly, it was the first time I have heard from Judge Crane or even met her. So I was curious to hear from her myself, as I believe other members of council were. Perhaps had she taken your position, her speaking wouldn't have been so objectionable. As for why I allowed such a breach of protocol in lieu of advancing important legislation, we accomplished everything I had planned to accomplish. We reviewed the PUD, we reviewed the moratorium. We did not cover the CRA as originally planned because I hadn't gotten a draft together to work from based on our previous discussions because I was busy with the PUD and the moratorium. Oh, and that pesky full-time job I have on the side. So every piece of current legislation was discussed, amendments proposed, and will be amended at tomorrow's meeting tonight. None of the council's business was impeded by Judge Crane. You are certainly welcome to disagree with my decision to allow Judge Crane to speak and answer questions from your group. I appreciate hearing from her thoughts on the plan, the questions being asked, and while I may disagree with her and the Summers Group plan, I welcome dialogue of all types related to the issue, even those I disagree with. Regards. Is there any other correspondence tonight? Mrs. Thompson, please.
I have an email from David Blystone. Men on the Lake Council members, my name is David Blystone, 5670 and 5676 Andrews Road. And my mother, Edith Blystone, lives at 5894 Reynolds Road. My family has run Blystone's Marine for 40 years, and I lived here for almost 20 years. I also employ people that live in Manor on the Lake, unlike a dollar store that already exists in the area and does nothing but take away from our community. My business attracts people from all over, including Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Michigan, and Canada. The money spent in my store stays here. The people that come here also purchase goods from other places in Manor on the Lake. A dollar store is not a business that attracts outside money to the area and certainly does not keep money here. I'm writing this because my family's opposed to another dollar store. I would also note that Manor Lake does not need any more rental apartments, as we are already at a high value percentage of rentals, and I believe people that own property are better for our community. Thank you, David Wester.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Spill.
On the letter, members of council, first off, I want to thank the members of council who volunteer their time to serve this community. It is often a thankless job and obviously an overwhelming amount of work. As a community, we truly do want to be helpful, not adversarial. We should all be on the same page with the goal of wanting the best version of Manor on the Lake possible. We may not always agree on the best path forward and or what is best for the community. Those occasional differences are expected, but the constituents should feel that their voice are being heard and their thoughts considered. As a citizen, we have always cared about what was happening in our town. It's just been challenging to keep in the loop. It has been difficult to follow along and know how to effectively participate. We've tried to become better educated on the process. We've tried to be informed and have the applicable documentation being reviewed in front of us. But the document isn't shared or available and or multiple versions exist. We're told to attend certain meetings to share our thoughts, and then are told at those meetings that we cannot speak. We're told to submit things in writing because public speaking might not be permitted, but then our written submissions are not addressed. We're told that there is a time limit of how long we can speak, but then others are granted much more time. We've been urged to share our concerns by coming to meetings, emailing all of council, and trying to have one-on-one communication with council members. Then had our thoughts referenced as the central copy and paste redundant bullet points that council has heard ad nauseum from the community. These mishaps are not okay, and our frustration should be understandable. Our redundancies are an indication of the passion your constituents feel about these issues. It should not be something in which anyone rolls their eyes upon hearing their concerns. These are high priority concerns for us right now. It is more than fair for us to have a desire to better understand why much council seems adamant about making decisions contrary to the community's wishes. Perhaps it is the infamous mainly Salida people talking, but then again, we are the ones actively participating. There should be some value in that. I realize the demands on your time as council members is tremendous. It's not an easy job. Clearly, there are a lot of moving parts. Ones we've all been trying to better familiarize ourselves as we become more involved as a community in the process. Our interest is in being true partners in developing key areas of Mineral on the Lake in a way that respects and treasures the wonders of the lakefront community we're blessed to have here. Please hear us. I sincerely thank you in advance for your time and consideration. Respectfully, Susan Lenahan, 7359 Salida Road.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none, we will move on to administrative and department head reports. Mayor and Safety Director, Mr. Eva. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Johnson, members of council, public here this evening. I received a memo yesterday from Chief Beeling. We have a new part-time communications officer that started today, Lisa Hill. She'll be training with Jen Coughlin. As I said, started today, and we'll work with Jen through training as part-time communications officer. Also received last week from John Rogers, the Lake County Land Bank. They took bids on June 17th. We have two properties that are with the land bank at this time: 5525 Chestnut and 5688 Chagrin. Those, according to John's memo, should come down around November of this year. Also, I sent out last week the police department report, which I normally do. If you looked at May, you could see the trend going up from April to May. I want to thank the police department. It looks like the trends that went up, looks like warnings for traffic violations, tickets, have a lot of loose dogs running around, selective enforcement, and it's every year you can see the trend from April to the weather gets good and then incidents go up. So I want to thank them. I also want to thank the service department. They were out on Salida late night, early morning, and took care of a tree that was down in the middle of the room. That concludes my report. I will turn it over to Tom and Matt. As I mentioned last meeting, they have some ideas about city plan.
Great. Thank you.
Can I approach and pass out a?
Sure,
presentation
absolutely.
here? I've got some for the audience too, so we'll follow along.
Great.
If that's okay.
Great. That'd be fine.
much.
Thank you very much, council and Mayor Conley, for introducing us and making this happen tonight. We have been coming to, I'm Tom Gillette, the son of Hannah Commercial, and it's Mac Bigger. And basically, one of the areas that we focus on is public sector economic development. And we felt this way particularly since COVID hit, that the need for private-public collaboration is greater now than ever. And you know, I've been in every role, so I want to just applaud everybody for taking on this. I've been in the seats, I've been a mayor, and I've been on council in Bay Village, and it's a very passionate and emotional situation sometimes, but that's what makes a great community. So what we do though is we go to communities that may not have a full-scale economic development department, bigger cities like that, and we see if we can act as almost an outsourced, law department or this or that, for particular projects that you might have problems with. So if we may, we'll go through this presentation real quick, please. We'll go to page 1 after the cover page, and sorry to hit you with this, but you see our pictures on here, it's our bios, all right? And between the two of us, we've been in the business for about 70 years. Mac's the president of the company, Hannah Commercial. Hannah Commercial is a consolidation of Osnor, Morris, the Chartwell Group in Kelly, Wisconsin. And I think the latest crane showed we had more brokers, commercial brokers than anybody in Northeastern Ohio, and, which isn't necessarily, they're all good firms, but we've been around a long time. So Mac runs the company, started Chartwell as a partner and principal and president of the company, and he's my partner, and I've been in the business about 34 years. Slight political stint in 10 years in Bay Village as a councilman of mayor. The next page is our Hannah Commercial Public Sector clients. So we've handled everything from, and before I was with the firm, but we did the acquisition and development of Gateway, which was major, we led that project from a real estate standpoint. And we've represented a lot of cities, we've worked with a lot of counties, and we've acted as, again, the tie, the nexus between the private and the public sector. So you can see our list there, it's pretty diversified. The next one is our clients that are private sector, and the majority of them are local. We have a lot that are regional, national, and international. We've got a corporate services department that deals with RPMs, companies that, so they handle a portfolio of all over the world. Then we go to the next page, the snapshot of what Hannah Commercial does. Okay, we do, we focus on office, industrial, retail. Sorry about that. Office, industrial, retail, property management, investment, land, corporate services, I just referred to, auction, and our newest department is business brokerage. Because I'll tell you, the short story is when I was in office, I only had to worry in the 90s about helping the businesses fill vacancies, some land development, this and that. Now I know you have to worry about companies staying in business, protecting your citizens so they keep their jobs. And a couple of, I'll get into that in a second here, but a couple of facts are 10,000 people are turning 65 every day. So the baby boomers are getting their retirement age, and as a result, there'll be a lot of movement, largest transfer of wealth in our system. So it's important that we protect those jobs. It's not just real estate related anymore. The real estate's affected if the companies go out of business as well. So they tie in with one another. And the next page is, well, just referring, business broker, referring to the tax 10,000 every day. Small businesses account for 99 plus 99% of businesses in our country. Most small businesses don't have succession planning. You know, their kids may have it. I've sold a couple of companies. My daughter didn't want it. Their husbands don't want it. You know, partner. So I mean, it's that type of thing. We either shut down or let you merge with somebody. And then just to a little flow chart on selling business. Or your head this point. But we do a great job on that. We have businesses listed. We have people calling from California, all over the country, depending on what the business is. And the conclusion, since I know you have a heavy agenda and some people, who want to talk. The conclusion is the private public sector collaboration is more important than ever. And by working together, there's a much greater chance to stabilize and grow your real estate base here, preserve companies and jobs, and make your vision for the future. And it'll have a positive impact on your tax base and your revenues as well. And then we just put in a little quote from Phil Jackson about the importance of keeping on the path. But that's it. And I think I said this earlier, but I was the economic development director as mayor. My council president was the economic development council was economic. And I had a couple of key people in the administration, and they did the same thing, but one of them being the building director. But I'll tell you, when we had basement flooding, that building director was on basement water. I mean, he was off the economic development, pretty much there. And same for my other directors that were involved in this. So that's what we're looking to do. Mac and I had come out and visited with the mayor and Holly probably 6 months ago, just to see what your needs might be.
I was going to say, thank you very much for that overview. And again, we want to stay within our 10-minute time limit here, but I think it's important that sometimes the city looks to an outside source to have some third-party, opinions out there to say, okay, here's some recommendations. Here's if you wanted to develop this commercial area here, here's some things we look at. So we don't end up with things that you don't need in the area, but we say, okay, if we think it would be great for X, how do we go about marketing that one day? So we met with the mayor and Holly, and we wanted to introduce ourselves to council and to the general public there. We are the sister company of Howard Hanna, but we do more consulting on this end of it, working with companies and also, cities out there. We work with South Cuba, for example, on a retainer basis. They look at their commercial strips out there and say, okay, what can we do here? How can we improve this? How can we bring in housing for, empty nesters? What can we do here to make this city as great as potential be? So we thank you for your time and happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Questions?
I know, Tom, you contacted us when you saw the Channel 5 news piece on the Dollar General. What is, the feeling, your opinions on things like moratoriums that could be put on these small box stores? I know, councils pass legislation right now for that, and also things like an overlay district for the properties that we have vacant. I know we shared, the map of what's vacant here in Mineral Lake. And, I think, and I'd like to hear your opinion on the moratoriums, and also, I think there has to be some flexibility in the overlay district based on the size of the lots that we do have vacant.
Yeah, I would agree that having a plan in place is a good idea to have kind of things that you're looking for so that you can go out and try to recruit the businesses that you want to have there. So you don't get all kinds, we deal with a lot of shopping centers and stuff, and they're always talking about tenant mix there. What attracts other businesses? How can this business benefit from the business next door? Or you don't want to have too many shoe stores or discount dollar stores or what have you out there. So I think it's it's coming up with a comprehensive plan ahead of time that says, okay, we have some discount dollar type stores out there. How many of those do we need and where do we want to have them, et cetera, versus other type of businesses that you talked about earlier that brings in tourist dollars, that brings in, and it's owned locally and it keeps the dollars in place.
How do you feel, you mentioned, strip centers, shopping centers, when those are privately owned? How would we go about manipulating or dictating what they should put in when they own that particular property and there's vacancies there? It just seems that for us to say, okay, we as a city or council would like to limit what you could put in there.
It becomes a difficult situation because you don't want to get sued as a community and go through that. I think what you want to do is to get together with those owners. We have a meeting tomorrow with a person who's trying to sell their property, happens to be in South Euclid, and we say, from the city's point, here's what we want to have. Here's the type of tenant we want to go after and we want to attract. And we can cope with those type of arrangements, even if it's not the most economical one for the owner. Maybe there's some programs we have as a city that could help attract that and make it worthwhile for you as the property owner.
And tomorrow's meeting, we'll have City Hall, we'll have Hannah Commercial, we'll have the broker for this one of the land, and then we'll have the owner. I mean, as an owner, I'd be thrilled if I was getting some direction assistance from the city. And the broker, I'd be thrilled too. So I think it's a team effort. It's a tough time in a lot of respects. It was really business. Working together. That's the problem.
I'm a little confused. We have been asking our city or suggesting that we need an overall plan for the city. It sounds like this is obviously what you do. We don't have any say in hiring people. Are you trying to get our city to hire you? I mean,
Yes, the city is the people who would hire us. Council would be the people who would approve those funds for that. I think if we took a look at it as a whole, obviously, we're not gonna make 100% of the people happy 100% of the time out there. But having a plan and a destination and saying, hey, if we could redevelop this, we've done a lot of work at redevelopment in the flats, gateway, and say, okay, how do we bring these parcels together? We're working with the downtown Cleveland area there to say, hey, how can we get some shovel-ready sites available out there to bring in companies like Intel, so that you can get that there. They wanted to go to Cleveland, they didn't have a site that was ready for them, so they ended up looking someplace else.
well, this has been what I think everybody here will agree with me. This is what we've been telling the city. We shouldn't be jumping on this or that. Let's get a plan and work towards that. So, I mean,
We certainly appreciate your comments and agree with you.
So I have a question. So what are the steps that we would need to go through to develop a plan for even just Andrews Road, our main?
Yeah, I
Business
think
district.
that what we would do is continue to talk to the mayor and group there and say, here's our proposal for Andrews. And we could talk about one strip, we could talk about the commercial area there, and then we come back to the plan and say, hey, and make that proposal to you and to the public out there and say, hey, here's what we think it would be, here's what would be involved in it. We could look at anything from sidewalks or bike paths or anything else like that within that community there that make it improve.
And do we have a ballpark on how much that might cost us?
Less than you think, actually.
Yes.
It's not all that much to get started. So I think it would, we have to have a scope of work and agree on that and then come back with a number based on that.
Question?
You asked one.
That was gonna be my question too. Is your retainer, is it based on city size or just scope of the work?
More scope of the work.
Okay.
For example, I'll just share, and it's not confidential, our agreement with South Euclid is a retainer at $4,000 a month for 1 year for $48,000. And it's to review all their parcels out there.
mentioned some very large scale projects. When we talk about Gateway Flats, some very large cities. Why Mentor on the Lake?
Well, I think each, go ahead.
I'll go to this list here because, again, it was the old Oscar Morris. When I was there with Oscar Morris, you know, we did City of Mayfield, Heights, North Ridgeville, South Detroit, Waycliffe. We met with a lot of, and even the big cities, bigger cities with pretty sensitive planning departments and this and that. We do this on a daily basis, you know. We have about a quarter of our staff was out in Las Vegas for their retail convention, and it's an annual retail convention, and they have thousands of developers, elected officials, and this and that, and all over the country. We're always where potential clients and developers are, and that's good. So why Mentor on the Lake? You know, it's a lot. It reminds me a lot of Bay Village. All right, I mean, it's a wonderful community held by the interest here. You know, but I also recognize the fact that you don't have big economic development. And you know, every time I come out to see you, Holly, you know, we don't have any people out there to run that like shit out there. So that's what we do. It's what we do on a daily basis.
We've done things from 2 parcels assembly to saying in Richfield, it's, how do we help that village acquire some land to do some development out there? So it could be, you know, 1 parcel, or it could be, hey, we own these parcels, what should we be doing with these? You know, what are we gonna do with the land bank property out there? How do we redevelop that or get it back, becoming an economic driver for the community versus a drain where you're not getting real estate taxes?
Have community members working with your groups?
Yeah, it would be a collaboration of trying to put together a plan that we make things work. Part of that is getting community involved.
Architects on your team or people that would help with the architectural?
Yeah, we do have some architects that we outsource work to. Not in-house, but we use exterior architects and space planners and, you know, developers and whatever. So we can bring in people as needed once we develop the idea. So that we can come up with pretty pictures.
And do you do zone review? So the zoning department, they get a set of plans and drawings. Would you be able to provide input onto that as to how?
Yeah, we're not trying to replace the zoning department by any means, but, you know, we own some buildings ourselves, and we have built a number of buildings, and we've gone through a lot of planning meetings out there in different places out there. Anything from putting in service stations to big, you know, tenant buildings to 250,000 square foot warehouse. So we're familiar with that, but I think the question is, you know, what's the scope of the work? What are we trying to accomplish? And I think it's, you know, on the main strip there is the main commercial area, so that's where I would focus on, and I would say, okay, what type of scope of work do we want to have here, and how can we be the most impactful for the fewest dollars?
You mentioned the city of Euclid. South Euclid, the work that you're doing there is under contract. Did you respond to a request for proposals, or did you approach them like you're doing here?
Approach them like we're doing here, and they said, yeah, we need some help. We'd like to have these parcels redeveloped. It's an old strip center now, and we'd like to see in there first floor retail, or perhaps even a YMCA there. But above that, we'd like to have it mixed use. We'd like to have some condos for people who want to be empty nesters, but don't want to own their own home anymore. And it's a great location.
And of the work that you've done, is it, my percentage guess, is it mostly inside of this thing called economic development? Or is it, let me finish, or is it a citywide vision plan of which a part is economic development and the total ambiance, those kinds of things?
More limited in scope generally speaking out there. It's not trying to come up with a whole, marketing of, on the lake. It's not saying, hey, let's come up with a new theme or a new logo or what have you. It's more saying, let's look at this area here. How does that fit in? How does that make it the most beneficial for the residents there and the most economically driven?
As a small community, as you said, David and his team are small.
Yeah, exactly.
Budgets,
Exactly.
all the things are small. So as a community member, I'm encouraging that we all think about, let's look at best practices, let's do a little gap analysis and find out what we can achieve. But without having a vision that's beyond next week, for the first person that's coming to the door, we always shoot ourselves in the foot. Not the city's fault. It's what happens as a course of the economy. So I'm interested in knowing if you've had situations where there was an RFP that you responded to that was broader in scope, because I think our council and our administration might benefit from seeing what other people have done to try and entertain, pull in high value talent for projects, not just because you saw our Dollar Tree struggle.
No, we were talking to them before we saw the Dollar Tree struggle out there. So,
Yeah, well, this is the first time we heard about you from Dave last week, or last month, when he said you were coming to this meeting, and so I'm anxious to see I was anxious to see this, and it'd be cool to see if you could share some of that other detail, Dave, maybe, the scope of work that you might be looking at, see if we can add value to the scope of work. Or maybe even an RFP if necessary before you go out and make a contract.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'll say one thing. I saw the Dollar, but it was after the playoff game, and it ended at 11:30 or 12. And I was like, and it's just the only thing I remember of it is you got to call Howie in the morning. So, but we've been out here.
Well, that's an interesting thing, I'll give credit to everybody in this room and all those people up there and all those people up there, because we didn't chase a dollar store. It chased us.
Yeah.
Now, we have to have a total community response. That's what we're seeing here, is a total community response. Private, public partnership, even though it's not under your formal title yet, of what you've seen from us, but that's what you see here, is a private community talking to the public, saying, how do we exercise ourselves in this issue?
And the one thing I think that the city has been missing that we really need to capture, and that is locally owned businesses. I think we, as the mayor said, the big chains, they don't want to be in there on the lake because we don't have a 4-lane highway. We're not in the middle of some central business district somewhere. So we are a little community. And so we need to shift our focus on attracting local, small companies to come here, small shops, entrepreneur type stuff, people that want to have a nice restaurant, want to have a nice shop. And I think this community can provide that. And that's where I think we're not getting the message out clearly enough.
Well, it's interesting because Bay Village is a lot like this. Westlake's just grown by leaps and bounds. I always say we're a suburb of Westlake. We're right up the street with Rockford Park. But we've attracted a couple of really nice restaurants. And got a business association with all the small business owners. And we're close hand in hand with each other. And but we also designated and utilized the appropriate areas so that there's synergy and they feel. It's not going to be a matter of over 150 people. That's something we don't want.
So you had 6 months on it. What's the statistical number on the next 8,007?
I haven't looked at that.
How many open properties are for sale?
We haven't looked at that. We have to do our homework on that. We came out here, there's 2,000 city, I know that statistic, 2,000 cities in the state of Ohio. And selected on where we go. And we have to come out here. So, over about 6 months ago, we had a meeting, we came back 2 months ago. So, and we're very careful on where we go after, because we'll never take another city that's contiguous or join another community competition. Even back in the 1500s, so when we had Wickliffe was the first one I got. The second one was Mayfield Heights, different demographics. The third one was North Ridgeville. We don't have competition with might take from one and use it for another. But I guarantee you, you hire us and we'll have it within 2 days.
So how do you feel about the onus that we've had a mayor in power for 11 years on the city website? There are 3 avenues to which the sector to formulate a plan that is not going to be.
I think it's probably a typical thing. We have more master plans on data with yourself, so we can shake us like that. It's a small town, you don't have an economic development department, and we wear a lot of hats. So that's small government. And that's why we do what we do. Sometimes we try to help.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
A few questions. You want all at once?
Whatever your preference.
First question is, I'm going to answer the mayor's question about moratorium on smallpox.
You're correct. I did not fully answer that question.
You didn't answer the
Well, I think that it's something that ought to be considered. I'd like to get legal opinion on that as well, to say, hey, what can we do? And I'm not as up to speed as I should be on the details or where that stands and what kind of fight where that stands. So that's question number one. I think anytime you do hold something off for a year or something, probably within your rights to do so. I think having a plan ahead of time would be helpful in doing that. But I think that's, I think a year you can do without having too much trouble, not being a lawyer. But I think more than that, you probably have to look at rezoning or whatever. So
I'd like to add to that, just from being a lawyer myself. I'm guessing that gentleman over there is the law director? Yes. All right. I never went anywhere without mine. But the fact is, you have to know what the precedent is, what the legal ramifications are. If the developer, the owner of the store has legal rights, if they don't, then, I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but there's a lot of legal issues.
We know all that. That really was what I was asking, or what the mayor was asking. I don't think. We've got $2 stores, just stone throw across the road, one around the corner, another around this corner. We missed the one way to view that question is, you talk about development, economic, social, religion, whatever. I think when looking at what is your opinion? Do we need another dollar store?
I will tell you, probably do not need another town store. The question becomes a law
She
question.
understands.
Can you block them from coming in? Or what period of time can you block them away?
Right.
I would think a community this size would not need 3 discount dollars.
Not within a couple hundred yards.
I'll add to that, we represented Ross Environmental several years ago. And we basically rewrote their zone, because Ross Environmental is one of the few total hazardous waste facilities in the country. And their main headquarters is up at Lorraine Community College, beautiful building, but their plant where people wear the white suits and everything else, go out there, is in Eaton Township, all right? So the sewers started going into Avon Lake, furthest north, then they went to Avon, then they went to North Ridgeville, and Eaton was the next one. So they hired Cresco to take 1,000 acres around that facility. And so they have a buffer, fence and this and that, and then they rewrote. But they had a plan, all right? They had a plan, and unless you have a plan, you can't execute it because it's a shotgun approach. You're being reactive rather than proactive, right? If you plan, then you can say, okay, this is where you're allowed to go, this is where you're allowed to go. I know in Bay Village, we had like 7 pizza parlors and like that. Then we got a plan. I like pizza, but not that much, So bottom line is you gotta have a plan. And that's where we see the smaller communities don't have that ability because of lack of staff.
Great, that's a perfect segue to my second question. I've been told by the mayor, by Holly, and by members of council, that as a city, we do not have the vision, not have the plan. And why would you have vision. Vision is your vision, plan is how you achieve that vision. So the fact that we don't have the vision or a plan, how important do you think it is to the city of Mentor on the Lake, and how important is it to fix that?
I think it's important to have a vision and a direction that you want to go. And thus develop a plan to implement that.
Is there any point, I mean, isn't it built into a plan that you have a goal? That's why you have a plan. So the vision comes first and then follows. That's what it works.
Well, just so we know about plans, we're talking about a master plan for the community. This community is a residential area. Built up. So we would agree that we don't need a plan for residential areas because there's already, what's there is there and it's not going away. Any type of a plan we're talking about.
Thank you.
Doing a master plan, or perhaps Andrews Road, both for now, we go into the future. And what a master plan does, we give you a framework for doing so many work. So that you have, you know, aspirational concepts in terms of what you're looking for in a particular area. Now, council, I don't know if people are aware, or you guys are aware, but 3 years ago, 4 years ago, spent an enormous amount of time, you know, rewriting the business section, you know, with the code, looking at appropriate uses and whatnot, and looked at the corridor, okay, of the road, and they made recommendations, and there were public hearings, there was a public hearing, and that was then adopted. So you could call, since that was for the entirety of the commercial district, you know, a plan, okay, that was implemented at that time. You guys would go agree with that, right?
Sure.
So maybe what we're talking about, okay, is a new plan, okay, that may want to look at, you know, especially the open areas and areas that may change over the years, so that we can determine what would be a good fit, okay, to make this a better community even than it is right now. Because we all agree that this is still a very good community, even with those $2, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I just add on to that. I think just to the gentleman who asked about.
I have question number 3.
I just want to add on to that, because we do know a little bit about the city. It's got about 5,700 people, if I read right, per capita income of 43,000.
About 7,000.
7,000, and a couple other facts, but it's still a Bay Village site. Bay has about 16,000. It reminds me a lot of Bay Village. As far as a plan, I refer back to Bay Village, which brag with the city here twice during my tenure. All right, it's a beautiful town. But the fact is, we have a lot of plans on the shelves. That's just how it goes. There's a plan, and then there's implementation. So I agree with you 100%. You don't have to take the whole community necessarily, but the areas you want to focus on.
Yeah, this is my, I think, perfect segue. Oh, question number
This
3.
is a double segue we get.
So,
This is 3 of 3, is that correct?
yeah, this is 3 of 3. And as Mr. Ryan's pointed out, the residential is kind of done. We have a lot of that. We have 41% of the population living in rentals. And we have only a few empty spots that could be commercial. The committee of zoning, 3 years ago, I think was pointed out, did an excellent job of defining what could happen to the rest of these. B1, B2 zone commercial. At the moment, what's at stake is the last 2 significant parcels that are zoned commercial. One is the church property where you saw the thing on TV about Dollar General. The other is that's 4 acres, a 3-acre lot up on the corner facing right across the street. It's the lake. What's at stake at this moment, which is why it's unfortunate you guys were here a year ago, is that the council appears to be just about to undo what they did with the zoning 3 years ago by converting and opening up those two commercial lots, the last two on Andrews Road Road, the last two of any significant size, to make them residential. This seems to be totally contrary to all the wonderful hard work that's going to be put in to put zoning in place to try to do something other than it. So it may be a little late in the game for all this wonderful vision and planning and stuff for the corridor, because what we have left is, probably within a week or two, don't know that's for sure, but it seems very likely that that's all going to disappear into condominiums and possibly $100. So is there really any point in talking vision and planning with the default to get rid of any property that you might use to achieve such a vision?
I guess my response would be it's never too late to come up with a plan or to change course or to redirect. Whether it's learning a new language at age 85 or whatever, it's never too late to accomplish it. They say when's the best time to plant a tree? 50 years ago. When's the second best time? Is tomorrow. So you have to look forward and say we are where we are. I think we all agree it's a great community. How do we make it even better?
I have to stand for this one so I can see Mr. Lyons when I ask this comment. I understand how you restricted plan to the commercial district in your thinking and your talking. Relevant to a vision, I don't think we write a plan without a whole community vision understood. Because nothing that gets bought in this community, as far as goods or services, doesn't affect some of these people from the perspective of taxes, from the perspective of ownership. So a vision helps lead that for the entire community. The revenues that come in support all of the services of the city, which affect all of the citizens of the city. And so I love the idea of having a plan that can be developed, but please let's also add in every sentence, under our vision, our plan for could be that, because we get lost and tangled up, and we can build a master plan for every single block, and that really won't do any good. It's a comprehensive city. It needs to have a comprehensive vision under which some of the things are a plan for its commercial districts. We have two different kinds of commercial districts. And I learned last night, no, Sunday night, Holly, this is probably news to you, I'm sorry, but the zoning map that we're dealing with today, right now, that CT Consultants sent to me is out of date. So it's not even the product that we're going to be using to decide on the PUD, to decide on the Dollar General, the properties that we're thinking about being a part of the plan. These citizens who want to know about it are not seeing the current data. And so that's a problem. And that means the vision has to include all kinds of transparency issues, all kinds of communication issues, all kinds of things. And that I know what master plans are. I've done a lot of planning in my life. But if we stop saying higher level thinking and higher level planning and visioning, we're going to get tangled up again, making the same mistakes.
So that you and I are talking the same thing.
Yes, but I didn't hear you
I think-
say vision.
I know, I think we are, but all I was saying is that the master plans that I have seen usually are for like the A-marks, okay, that were growing and growing, and you had this big area, that was, looked like it was gonna be developed, and they wanted to know, what are we gonna have in each of these areas, and what kind of, units, density, all of those kind of things. And I was just saying in terms of the talk that we're have been having about, what's going on a little north of us. Really, a master plan wouldn't have made any difference except how it would affect Andrews Road. Well,
It's a much more mature community.
Are much more mature.
And I'm sorry to take too much time, but I want to also mention that there is an awful lot of commercial property along Lakeshore that is a part of our city
No, and I think
as well. And so if we say master plan, that means every single thing that is currently zoned properly, business one, business two, commercial one, commercial two, all the residentials that are on the map shows they're commercial and they're not. So those things are important for us to think about.
just my understanding of the there's not much residential of any residential land that's left.
If we put a plug in,
Now, that could,
I'm sorry.
that could be considered residential, I agree, but that's something that your plan has been talked about now. And in the same way that it would be talked about in a master plan for the Lake Shore Andrews Road corridor. I think I'm talking too much. I'm gonna go back to my own report.
No, in fact, I'm gonna invite you to my living room. Long conversation. We want a conversation about that. But I do think that visioning includes the whole community, and a plan is a.
So I know, and I agree with that. I mean, so the
Okay.
plan, if there is, if that's what somebody's gonna do going forward, would see if it works for the community as a whole, not just for Andrews Road.
But what we've come to in the last 6 weeks or 8 weeks is a really good concept that says we don't want any more rentals. And a vision in our community that's been an aggregate response is we don't need any more rental properties. We've got more than the national average. So now our vision includes that. It includes home ownership and condominiums and those kind of things, plus our business district. I'm done.
We don't need any more.
All right, I'm gonna read in the questions now. I
We're
think
about
we,
to convert the last two pieces of this package we have to residential.
all right,
So
thank
that's
you.
what we need.
Thank you. We're gonna rein that in now, before I get accused of allowing too much of a show here or something. So thank you for coming.
Thanks for.
Appreciate
for your
hearing
time.
from you. I thank you for answering the questions of the audience.
Presentation. You're welcome your comments or emails or whatever way you like. to get them done.
We wish we could see you sooner.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you. Presentation. We appreciate your time.
We like what you have to say. We wish the city had heard this earlier.
all right, order. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Administrative and department head reports. Administrative Director, Mrs. Bartone.
The only thing I have on the agenda that needs to be passed tonight is the funds transfer that we have to at the end. The majority of that is just to cover the debt payment that you guys all approved at the last meeting, and the last line is to move some of the ARPA money that was also approved at the last meeting, cover some of the general expenses we had and the regular CCs that we decided on.
Law Director, Mr. Lyons, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, council. This is a nice segue into my signal report.
All right, questions to administration and department heads. Anyone? Hearing none, we'll move on to board committee commission reports. First up, special committee on the moratorium.
So we met on Monday, June 20th. We went over some ordinances, present for myself, Mr. Shaboo, Mr. Morris, Ms. Moore, Mr. Johnson, and multiple members of the public. The committee went over, like I said, multiple ordinances. I'm just going to list them, tell you the recommendations. So we went over 1284.04, which was sign regulation. The committee had no recommended changes. 1258.05, yard regulations, no recommended changes. 1240.01, the purpose statement, no recommended changes. 1258.02, permitted building usages. We voted to add small box stores to the not permitted in business 1 or business 2. So put that together. 1242.025, the committee is going to review the suggested language from Susan Kaysen. We all didn't have that ahead of time, so we're going to review the suggestion she had made to add it to that ordinance. Under 1240.02, the committee would like to add the definition of small box. 1256.12, approval of the site development plan. There was no recommended changes. At the end, Mr. Morris suggested he would like a zoning committee to be like a design and review board. That was under chapter 1224 of the Vermillion ordinances. So he's recommending like a board to look at design. We concluded at about 7.
Thank you. Council of the whole to discuss the PUD CRA moratorium. Council met on Monday, June 20th at 7 p.m. Present were Mr. Bittner, Mr. Lunder, Mrs. Thompson, Mrs. Moore, Mr. Shaboo, Mr. Morris, and myself, as well as Mayor Eva. We had a special guest, Judge Elaine Crane, who's the owner of the property at Lakeshore and Andrews. Judge Crane was provided an opportunity to speak to council and the residents pertaining to the proposed PUD, her vision for the property, why she elected to work with the Summers Group to bring out her aspirations for the property. Judge Crane was provided the forum to answer questions from the audience from concerned residents who object to high-density housing being developed at the property. After the question and answer, council reviewed proposed changes to ordinance 2022-0-05, the planned unit development district. There was a proposal to reinstate one-family detached housing, which was agreed to. Mr. Morris proposed striking the additional verbiage regarding the right away, the setbacks. That was rejected. We also went over the moratorium. There was a discussion over the whereases. We agreed to a certain set of whereases, eliminating some of the others. We did not discuss the CRA as I didn't have a written proposal for that night. And we adjourned around 8:20. Let's see, there were no other board and commission reports, is that correct? What else met yet? Okay. Legislation before council, resolution number, oh, missed that part. Thank you. Open to the public to speak. If you'd like to speak, please come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Grace, 7574 Delia Drive. So almost a year now, we've been consumed with the PUD moratorium, the idea of expansion of rentals. But I've been looking beyond that since the mayor back in May's meeting talked about the $1.2 million project he wants to push forward with his agenda. I still haven't heard back from the mayor in public forum here and his reports, engagement from ODNR, Daniel Troy's office, or Mr. Joyce's office. So I put it on myself and done it. When are you guys available in July for a meeting? There are currently 2 grants available to the major work program of ODNR. Deadline July 15th, November 2022, another one. So there are avenues to get stuff done in the city beyond the city's control of the administration to my left. There's 3 entities within our city guidelines that publicly posted online, which we don't need a 48,000 public forum, private entity to tell us what businesses we should have in this community. Council needs to start thinking and engaging the community and look what's on and support by the charters. And engage. We don't need to be paying 48,000 to tell us what to put on 32 acres at McMinn. Someone comes in, 10 acres over there on Lakeshore that they want to come in and put a boardwalk, triple 3-story boardwalk all the way down to Lake Erie. It's time to start thinking, people. Thank you.
Anyone else? None. We will close this portion of the public. We'll now move on to legislation for council. Resolution number 2022-R-13. If you're please read it by its title.
Resolution number 2022-R-13, third reading. A resolution approving the 2023 budget.
Any discussion? None. Is there a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye. Ordinance number 2022-0-05, if you could please read it by its title.
ordinance number 2022-0-05, third reading, referred to council of the whole. An ordinance creating chapter 1255, lakefront planned unit development, PUD, district of the codified ordinances.
Two things I'd like to accomplish. First of all, is there a motion to amend as we agreed to at the committee of the whole meeting?
So they-
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
No.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. The second order of business for this is Mr. Lyons kindly went through the ordinance to tighten some things up, add some verbiage. I would like to review that tonight to see if we want to amend it again to reflect those changes. So under 1255.01 purpose application, under part B, sorry, adding in the words to application, to the application of principles to the PUD district. We should have a copy of that. Hard copy. Any discussion on that? Everyone's okay with adding that in? We'll just vote on everything unless there's an objection somewhere as we go through. 1255.02 designation of PUD overlay district. Under B3, the PUD zoning can be applied only is added in to properties zoned as business 1 and 2 per ordinance 1258. Okay with that?
Was there a change in A?
No. Oh, there is a S added in under districts. It's more a clerical issue than substantive, so. Everyone's okay with that? Okay, under 1255.02, part D, effective rezoning to PUD overlay district. This is D3, where it says PUD overlay district reverts to the base zoning if and when the purpose for which the PUD overlay district was granted is no longer viable, added in, or if the project was not substantially completed within a 3-year period, the period for substantial completion can be extended by the action of council.
I have a question. I don't remember going with 3 years.
That's
Why
new.
that
That's the
time?
added in portion. Or if the project was not substantially completed within 3 years. We're saying you better get it done within 3 years, otherwise your PUD isn't going to be.
We're giving them that much time.
If we need to make it less, if we are not at all.
I added that in. I didn't quite know what it meant to say. No longer viable. I couldn't
Right.
Quite tell when.
Right, there's no time limit there for what's
So I
viable.
thought you could put a number and I picked 3 years. It may take them a year to mobilize and then maybe 2 years to build out the whole thing. I mean, 3 years could be too long. 2 years, you could do 2 years. I said, as long as you give council the right to extend it. I just thought we needed some sort of an ending because I didn't know
I agree.
when viable was. And then probably we should add
water occurs first and 10. If for some reason we can determine it's no longer viable after 1 year, and it's a 2-year period, then we can declare it's no longer viable after 1 year. So that's how.
So how many years would you like it to be?
I like the fact that we can terminate it if we don't feel the project is viable.
Well, I don't think.
But how do we determine whether it's viable?
Right. I mean, there's no standards in here for determining whether it's viable or not. Sometimes people are making slow progress by putting.
So the,
I would recommend asking Mr. Cleveland. How long would something like this take to complete?
we asked the question.
Sir, Mr. Cleveland. The proposal at hand here is if the project was not substantially completed within a 3-year period, the period for substantial completion can be extended by act of the council. How long would it take? Let's say summer, this all goes through and summer group is building. How long do you think that should take? Year, 2 years, 3 years?
12 to 18 months to sell it out.
So about a year and a half.
Yeah. If it's done in 2 years, and then they made a mistake or there's a problem or something, the actual construction will take probably less than a year. When they get the permits, it shouldn't be more than a year to build it out.
Thank you, sir. Well, there's the answer.
What year would you like to put in?
I'll put 18 months, year and a half.
I like 2.
You like to, he likes 18 months. What does everybody else like?
I'll go 2.
2?
Yeah.
2, 2, 2. Okay, we're gonna go with 2.
Along with whichever occurs first in time.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, we are moving on to I'm going to make one suggestion under 1255.07 under development standards. This is gonna go back to what we've discussed so many times. Minimum setback for street right of way. The only change I want to make is to the added verbiage, since I've lost on getting that taken away. Where 20% or more of the aggregate street frontage of the abutting property between 2 successive intersecting streets is occupied by buildings, the average of the setbacks of the existing buildings within 100 feet on either side of the lot, instead of shall determine the setback line for that lot, may be used to determine the setback line for that lot. So instead of saying it shall be that, it may be used for that. You can't get people to take it out of there, so. Okay, under 1255.08, review required. You just added in the A, B, C, D, E, and so basically enumerating it. Any objections to that?
SEC has a.
C has- No, I'm talking about just under B. We haven't gotten to C yet.
Okay.
You're fine.
Correct.
So everybody's fine with just the added in A, B, C, D, E there. All right, then under approval of preliminary plans, added in, city council must then approve the preliminary plans in order to allow the proposal to move to the next step in the PUD approval process. Okay, so it just adds in words to require us to approve the preliminary plans before it can move forward. Everyone's okay with that? Okay. Under D, development agreement. This is all PUD plans, including the preliminary plans is added in. shall be accompanied by a development agreement, et cetera, in that statement there. But so including the preliminary plans was added in. Any objection? None. We will move on to D3, minimum open spaces in acres. Okay, so this is in the development agreement, so a minimum open space in acres. It also needs to say who is the owner of the open space and who is responsible for the care and maintenance of the open space. That being, sometimes there's a public-private partnership there, or there might be a public park added in or something like that. Is everyone okay with adding that in? Okay. D4, the proposed development plan, if at the preliminary stage of the application process, and the approved development plan after the development plan has been approved by the planning commission and council. So there's added words there instead of just the approved development plan being part of the development agreement, but the proposed development plan, if at the preliminary stage of the application process, and the approved development plan after the development plan has been approved by the planning commission and council. Those are parts of the development agreement.
The purpose of that is when they're approved, they leave you a code, well, they explain that they're seeing. Where for.
Questions, comments? In there? Okay, under added in 6. Declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions as to the use of the land. So those need to be in the development agreement. Concerns there? Okay. Under E, execution of development agreement. So the development agreement shall be executed by both city and developer prior to final approvals and issuance of permits required under Part 12 of the Mentor on the Lake zoning code to commence construction. So added in under Part 12 of the Mentor on the Lake zoning code. Council must approve the development agreement. Just we must agree to that version. Any questions or concerns there? Under G, approval of final development plans. So final plans of the project shall be submitted to and approved by the commission before construction is started. If it finds that, this is the added part, all approvals of the planning commission and council have been obtained and the plans meet the requirements of chapter 1255 and any requirements of the zoning code. Questions, comments, or concerns there? Hearing none, that was all. So is there a motion to amend as presented?
Motion made.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo.
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Thank God, that'll hopefully be the end of that. Okay, moving on. We are now on ordinance number 2022-0-09. Please read it by its title.
Ordinance number 2022-0-09, third reading, referred to council of the whole. An ordinance establishing a 12-month moratorium on the acceptance and processing of applications for zoning and or occupancy permit approvals for small box discount stores and the issuance of such approvals in the city of Mentor on the Lake and declaring an emergency.
For the committee of the whole meeting, we discussed changing it to a 6-month moratorium from a 12-month. We eliminated all of the whereas clauses above whereas in accordance with the Constitution of the State of Ohio and the pertinent provisions of the Ohio Revised Code. So all of the whereas above that going to be stricken. We added in from planning and zoning the definition of small box discount stores. Is there a motion to amend? Motion made by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mrs. Thompson. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
No.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Okay, discussion on it. Thoughts, concerns? Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Mr. Bittner, seconded by Mr. Morris. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder.
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. Okay, that is passed. Old business. Is there any old business tonight? New business. Yes.
Mr. Gray brought up about a couple of grant possibilities for the revetment and improvements of Lower Park. And he said that the grants expire, I believe, on July 15th. And he requested if there's a chance we could meet before that. I think we should to discuss that, because I hate to see us miss out on a great opportunity.
I believe that is a wonderful thing that we should meet on, and I think that we should submit that to the Community Development Committee, which you happen to chair. So lucky you.
Yes. Okay. Well, we set a meeting, we'll set a meeting.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
You are so welcome. Anybody else with new business?
You're such a nice guy.
Not everybody thinks so. And I'm okay with that. Any other new business tonight? All right, we have the transfer of funds approval for tonight. As presented here, is there a motion to approve the transfer of funds?
Motion made.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Thompson, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner.
Aye.
Mr. Lunder. Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye. All right. We will now move open to the public to speak. If you would like to speak, please come to the lectern, state your name and address for the record.
But Bill Cleveland, slide away. Just a little piece of arithmetic. As the plan is amended and approaching a vote in its current form, dealing with condominiums and the density at 12 per acre, and using Lane Craig's property as an example, with 0.6 over 60% of the land being utilizable to put buildings on. At 12 per acre, as President Johnson explained at the last, or one of the last meetings, that density is calculated based on the total acreage of the lot. That seems to be the current interpretation. If you do the math, that means that on the buildable portion of the property, the density will actually be 19 units per acre of the property available to build on. So it's simple math. If anybody doesn't understand that math, I'll be happy to explain that in more detail. It's pretty simple. 3 acres, approximately such as the land has, goes down to 1.8 acres when you multiply by 0.6. So you're going to put 35 condominiums, not on 3 acres, but on 1.8 acres. And you divide 35
by 1.8, you get actually 19.4. So we just call it 19. So it's really even higher density than you think.
Anyone else?
Juanita Miller, 7597 Salida. First of all, I want to thank the service department, and anybody that was in charge. It was my house, that the tree went down, that shut down the street in the middle of the night. It scared the heck out of me. I didn't even hear it. I just happened to get up and saw this blob there. They were very efficient. They had it cleaned up, I think, in 2.5 hours maybe, in the middle of the night. So I want to thank everyone who was involved in that. And then I just want to ask a question again. Bringing this Representative Suhana here, are you considering, because we obviously have no say, it's hiring them. Were they brought here to convince you? Are you considering hiring an outside source to make a plan? My question.
So I will let the mayor answer that because this was our first meeting with him. I had met him before. So I heard the same things you did.
Yes, I was just confused.
What we will do, we will get a hold of Tom and his team and see what the proposal is. You know, he had suggested, it's out, you put just $4,000 a month or $8,000. That would be something that council would have to approve as an appropriation to, you know, let's say, consultants coming in.
So we would have to determine the scope of work, what we would expect out of them, decide how much we would be willing to spend towards it.
Yeah.
But so this is just a preliminary. Anyone else?
I want to, I guess the only thing I really want to say tonight is, thank you for Salida for putting that 25-mile-an-hour thing there. I really like that for me personally too, because when I'm not paying attention and the thing's flashing at me, I realize I'm speeding. So I think it really does work, and I just want to thank everybody for doing that. It does keep traffic flow down a little bit. So I just want to commend everybody. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we will close this portion of the meeting to the public. Announcements and settings of meetings. First off, we have the public hearing on ordinance 2022-0-05, Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 at 7 p.m. There'll be a regular agenda meeting Thursday, July 7th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Regular meeting of the council will be held on Tuesday, July 12th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Additional, so ordinance, you were supposed to meet tomorrow night. I believe you guys were going to move that meeting. Is that correct? When did you want to move your ordinance committee meeting?
Let's look at the city calendar.
Good call.
Yeah, I'm on that too.
Just trained us. Figure that out. Planning and Zoning Commission will meet Monday, July 11th, 2022 at 6 p.m. Is that correct? 6 p.m. That is Monday, July 11th at 6 p.m.
I'm sorry, what committee?
That is the Planning and Zoning Commission. 6 p.m.
So the first, Ms. Moore has commitments the week of July 4th. So the first. Oh, that's not on the calendar yet. That's the planning and zoning. We can do after the planning and zoning at 7 on the 11th, or the next available would be July 14th.
I would rather go July 14th, just in case the PNC meeting runs up.
All right, 7 PM,
That's
does
fine.
that work?
Yes.
Okay, so that's July 14th, 7 PM for the ordinance committee meeting. Community development.
Yes, sir.
I have a question about, you were asking about the funding from
The different grants. Yes.
different grants. Doesn't Holly usually handle it?
Yes, she does.
Why would
Council would have to approve her to apply for it.
we have to approve you to apply for that?
So, community development. Because of the timeliness of this thing, what's your availability on a Thursday, June 30th? Desiree, you're on, and Dave Shabu's on it.
All right. For what day?
The 30th.
Thursday.
Thursday. Oh,
What do you want to move? I really kind of like to get it done as soon as possible. I mean, if we need to move it the next week, that would be okay too.
yeah, my work schedule this week is not the
Okay.
greatest.
Uh,
Tuesday, the 5th.
There's a civil service test. in here.
Oh, that's right.
So we can meet later, because I can't imagine it taking a long time
2 hours.
for the test. It'll be 8 o'clock. I see that the community rooms reserved on the 7th, from 7:30 to 8:30. Who's reserved it for that hour? No, Colin?
McMinn, it says McMinn.
Does it?
No.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it does.
No.
But I'd like to us meet before next council meeting,
I mean, I'm available on the 8th.
the 8th. Friday evening?
Yep.
Is that okay with you?
I don't think it'll be long.
No. The 8th at 7 o'clock? Okay. And we will meet July 8th at 7 PM.
I mean, if you wanted to do 6, I can do 6 on Friday.
And right now, the way my life is
Okay.
run, yeah,
Okay, I just want to make sure, because
I
I know
appreciate that.
you guys were changing for me, and I appreciate it.
I'm all of a sudden babysitting 2 granddaughters. One's autistic.
What time?
Okay, so that's
7 PM.
Friday, July 8th, is that correct?
Yes.
7 PM, community development meeting.
Yes.
So special committee. We still have to review Ms. Cason's ideas and then come back. Being that the HUD or the moratorium was passed, I don't feel it as urgent, but we can. It's up to you guys. The 4 of us.
Michelle. Yes. When did you want to meet?
Like I said, I do want to put it out further because
It's up to you, sir.
I don't know how your guys' schedules are. I mean, we're already
How far do you want to go?
4 to 6 months.
How about, either the 11th or the 18th, 16th, 19th?
So if you did the 11th, you'd have to do it 7.
There's a P and Z on the 11th.
Is there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay, yeah.
We should
And he
do
just said Tuesdays are bad for him, so how
So
about
the
the 14th?
Ordinance
You have
meeting is on 14.
Ordinance.
That's right.
Why don't we
What about the
postpone this?
You guys are all free on the 26th. Just
What-
saying,
What are you trying to say?
just saying,
What's wrong
26
with
is
the
good for
26?
everybody here.
26 would be perfect.
Just saying,
We don't.
I know everyone's available
Yeah.
and the room's open.
We need to meet on the 18th, so we could use that spot.
Let's send it after the 12th.
For when?
Our council meeting after the 12th. Let's set
Okay,
it
we'll set it up on
for
the
that.
12th. Okay.
Okay, so that'll be held off until after the 12th. Schedule. Anything else? And so that was Mrs. Cason's environmental impact stuff,
The
or,
proposal for 1242.025.
yeah, okay,
Yes, that would be the environmental impact.
okay. Just
that
wanted to
she
confirm.
wants added into
Okay.
our- Yes.
Anything else, or you guys scheduled enough meetings now?
I think there's
I think we're meeting now.
All right,
The CRA.
a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Second.
Made by Mr. Morris, seconded by Mr. Bittner. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bittner,
Aye.
Mr. Lunder,
Aye.
Mrs. Thompson.
Aye.
Mrs. Moore. Aye. Mr. Shaboo,
Aye.
Mr. Morris,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye, this meeting is adjourned.